Hey, good morning, world. It is February 23rd, 2022 at 9:41 in my neck of the woods. And this is crazy. I mean, this is getting wild, guys. We're approaching. I just happened to look right before I pressed click on this, and this is why I decided to just go for it, because things are coming at me fast and furious. We had over 100, we're approaching 170,000 views in less than 3 weeks. And that's just out of nowhere. Again, like I've said in previous, video posts, that it's like, yeah, I went to TikTok to lose time to check out all the freaking superhero people do their shtick, and I, seriously can lose up to an hour without even blinking my eye. And I never thought it would be a place where we could actually have some sort of national dialogue, but hey man, it's happening. There's some strange things on Facebook. I think shadow banning and all sorts of things. Twitter does what Twitter does, and everything does happen on YouTube. So I guess the first thing that I would say, is that I want to address. A lot of people are making comments. Okay, Patrick, what if everything you're saying is exactly right? What do we do? I've been getting that question for a long time. And, the first thing I want to assume is that the people that are asking the question have already gone to www.thecon.tv and actually watched the con and then go, oh my God, this is the details of what it is that the whole system has been keeping from me. Okay, then you can ask that question, but with more fluidity, because the answers are pretty much baked into the con. But I'll get to it in just one moment. We're approaching the midterms, right? And you're going to see this. If I stick my finger in the wind and I, take a temperature read, sorry to mix metaphors, what it looks like is that the Republicans are going to make a move in the House, and maybe a substantial one at that. And, this blue wave meritocracy that's run and controlled by the Wall Street, puppet masters behind the scene is the reason why they're going to lose. I mean, Biden came in and, he's done a lot under the COVID Act and a lot of things that have taken shape there. But, this is an ongoing 4 decades of madness. And really, if you go back to 2019, which was a step and repeat of what happened in 2009 after the great financial crisis that nobody understands. Again, go to the con, www.thecon.tv. And then you get to this point, and this is where I'm coming from, that the whole reason why we had to do the con was because the mainstream media, whose job it is under the Fourth Estate, failed to do what was now, from my perspective, after having actually pulled the thread on this and going on this journey to get the truth right. And by the way, we would never have released this if we didn't have to go through a whole litany of fact-checking and getting it right under legal constructs. Otherwise, we'd be sued like crazy. But the fact is, what we've presented are the facts. And what we've presented and hasn't, hit the world the way it should have until this kind of stuff that's happening right now through this effort on this page is what should have happened a year and a half ago, but it didn't because of a couple of things. One, there's basically, we all know about cancel culture. So imagine your notion of cancel culture, but imagine the entire system hiding this story that it is that we took incredible effort, painstaking detail, years of effort with all the highest level professionals in the system. And we got this thing exactly right. That's what they've canceled. Now, you got to ask yourself like a couple of questions. Well, why isn't it relevant? Why are you talking about the 2008 great financial crisis? And why is it relevant to today, to what we have to do to supposedly purge the corruption that you're talking about, that we all know, but we don't understand the details, right? So we all know the system is rigged. We all know that there's this ginormous disparity of wealth. We know that somebody's getting away with something, but we just don't understand who's doing what, when, and how, and who covered it up. And that's what I'm bringing to you and handing to you on a platinum platter, again, at www.thecon.tv. And also, I would urge a lot of you folks that are coming in and you're thanking me. I mean, there's plenty of haters out there, but there's plenty of haters, you can tell by their comments, that they don't have a freaking clue how the world works anyway. Fine. Go ahead until, we're going to steamroll them with the truth, because when you have the truth, you're literally bulletproof. Is there one singular truth? Yeah, maybe. That's an existential question. That's a religious question, everything else. The truth I'm talking about is that our system is corrupt, and I know how. And I know exactly how it works, which again is on display completely at www.thecon.tv. I would urge all of you who are actually interested in purging corruption and creating I don't want to call it a revolution. It's a revolution in our brain. It's a revolution against our consumerism, the political nature of corruption, and also to reinvent our energy paradigm, which is actually kind of in the mix. And I'll get to that in a minute. But, you know, what to do? What are we to do? The government, of course, and our elected politicians are supposed to be the ones that recognize these problems on behalf of the American people. And they're the ones with the access to power and the access to writing the laws and the access to actually doing the investigations, the holding bad players accountable, are the ones responsible for actually making sure this doesn't happen. But what I'm telling you is they haven't done that. They've failed the American people, and we're going to see another failure from the Democrats as this increasing interest in all things MAGA, that are like, look, it's the deep state. It's they've come after Trump. It's all of these things. I'll address some of those situations downstream, but ultimately, yes, the blue Wall Street 4 decades. Ivy League, Wall Street meritocracy has pulled the wool over your eyes in this whole deep state scenario, which is right in front of your face, which is ultimately neoliberalism and financialization of the country, where they killed the golden goose and then they didn't hold the bad guys accountable. And the bad guys didn't do what Barack Obama said, which was, it was disgusting, it was revolting, it was unethical, it was this, it was that, but it was not illegal, which is absolute bullshit. All of it was completely illegal. The Obama administration just didn't hold them to account because they were paid not to. There's no other conclusion. You were played. It was a grift. Change we can believe in was to freaking make sure that the system that we had stayed in place. That's it. And then people got pissed. The white working class, after 4 decades of being hammered, they knew shit was wrong. They knew that Hillary Clinton wasn't working for them. They knew the Clinton Foundation was up to its eyeballs in all sorts of bad activity, which of course bleeds into this whole thing called Epstein. And that's why I was going to talk about, what is relevant. I mean, why was Weinstein relevant after 2.5 decades of this guy basically having and I love Weinstein films, don't get me wrong. Tarantino is my favorite director of all time, up there with Scorsese and, maybe a couple of others, Oliver Stone. But the Weinstein Company, literally under Harvey Weinstein, the whole thing was a setup to basically rape women, to control them, so that he could actually, negotiate and have leverage over what movies that they did to keep them in his pocket. And everybody inside the Weinstein machine was in on it, especially his human resource director, which was a woman who got elevated to become like a director of development. And she looked the other way. So when we start to think about these issues, like these gender issues, and we try to think about, quite frankly, race issues and a lot, let's not lose sight of the fact that a lot of people that should be on the right side of things will just go where the money is. And they'll just chase the power, that they have no integrity, that they have no character, that they'll sell you out for themselves. That's the culture that we've created. That's who these freaking charlatans, these hyenas, these vicious freaking trolls that are in absolute control operate. That's all they do. They learn this stuff back in the day in high school. Many of them come from very wealthy families that go through the Ivy League, and they understand their own secret code. They know that they're going to protect each other's interest. But what I had to find out, and I've known that my whole life, okay? So I grew up in the upper middle class. My father's a professional. My grandfather was a successful guy, but I grew up in Houston, Texas, which is an industry town. Houston, Texas is to fossil fuel what Hollywood is to entertainment, which, the Silicon Valley is to technology, and Washington, D.C. and politics, and New York to finance, that sort of thing. So it was a very, very powerful place. It was filled with, quite frankly, finance, and it was also filled with military, industrial, and fossil fuel. And those people are unbelievably committed and, ambitious. And I grew up with that sort of mentality. I'm that kind of guy. I learned years ago that, I went a different direction, and maybe one day I'll be able to, lay that on you. But I'm an entrepreneur, man. I'm a producer. I'm a guy that gets after it. I'm all about business, right? But I'm also all about the truth. I want a fair playing field. Again, I've told you guys in the past, I was a football player growing up. I played rugby for a long time. I'm an athlete. right? I wasn't the greatest athlete. I was pretty good in certain things at certain times. But the bottom line is that I know that if someone's cheating or has a game rigged, that it would piss me off beyond all high heaven, and I wouldn't stand for it. Well, why would I stand for that in the way the actual country operates, based on the way our finance system has hijacked the entire apparatus of government, and it's created this corrupt system that pays itself and then blows you up, and they get rich while you get poor. That's the bottom line. And so your misery is what they feed on. And if that doesn't piss you off, I don't know what else to tell you. Because you're supposed to live in a country, right, that has the law, where nobody's above the law, and that we all have a fair shot. And so that you're supposed to be able to rise to your level of competence based on what you put in. But I'm here to tell you that I'm trying to break through that freaking wall, like that commercial, 1984, that was, the George Orwell 1984 ramification of, Steve Jobs and Apple introducing the Macintosh back, that aired in 1987, I believe, in the Super Bowl, when ultimately everybody was sitting on these pews staring at this guy on screen, where they were all just stupid listening to what this guy had to say, when, of course, this hero rolls in, she's in color, and everybody else is in grayscale, and then she basically throws the hammer down, and then it shatters the world to be able to reveal the truth. That's what I'm doing to you right now. And it's in the con, www.thecon.tv. And also, please, go to YouTube. I beg you, go to YouTube to Patrick Lovell, Truth Bombs the Con, and then watch my videos. Give me your notes. Let's come together. What I'm trying to do is create a civil rights-like movement to purge corruption. How do we do that is the question that I started off with. Guys, it's simple. We have got to come together with the facts. So you got to watch the con first, completely. Then once you actually understand what's happened to you and how this system operates, we have to start organizing and getting people together to create this movement called the Great Resurrection, that then starts to get our messaging out to all of the people that aren't listening, particularly mainstream media, and most notably the guys who are claiming they're against corruption, but that are ignoring the story because they're chasing the zeitgeist. And who are they? I'm talking about Joe Rogan, and I'm talking about Russell Brand primarily. Two guys I listen to all the time, two guys that I really enjoy and I like. I've got a couple of issues with both of them slightly, but you know what? Nobody's perfect, right? I'm not perfect. I'm not claiming to be perfect. I'm just telling you, I'm the guy that's got the freaking $29 trillion truth that devastated tens of millions of people around the world, and I'm trying to get you people to understand what actually happened to you. Because you got set up, they stole your lives, they left you out to die, and they expected you never to come back. How do I know? I was one of you. I lived it myself, but I'm not that kind of human being. I don't just sit and look at my navel all day long trying to think that somebody else is going to come save me. That's not who I am. I'm like, I got to figure out what the hell's going on. Because I knew they were pissing on my head telling me it's rain because they thought I was some kind of new fool. And I said, fuck that. What I did was, with my team, we got all the facts, we got all the right people, we went to all the whistleblowers, we got the evidence, we put it all together. And this is what the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Federal Bureau of Investigations and the DOJ should have put together. And quite frankly, many of them were putting it together until they had their loafers tied together or glued together by the Obama administration. Eric Holder and his hitman. Why can't I think of his name right now? The guy who famously has RFK over his shoulder in his office, who completely betrayed everybody. Just like Geithner claiming that the American, not claiming, saying that the American people are foam on the runway for this corruption, of which that guy got a lot of money. Geithner was supposed to be the regulator that stopped this stuff. Instead, he elevates to becoming, one of the guys in the mix, during these ginormous emergency stimulus bailouts that backdoored the American people, and nobody understood that it was $29 trillion that Wall Street got paid by to bury us, that they ended up spending $250 billion for this thing. In fines. So ultimately, and by the way, again, there's a lot of talk in media right now about Donald Trump and his documentation fabrication as it relates to election certification fraud. That's going to become a big issue in the midterms, and at least on the left, or the blue, or whatever you want to call them. It's certainly not liberal. But the long and the short of it is, okay, fine. So Donald Trump probably did that. I'm going to suspect, yeah, of course he did. That's what Donald Trump does. Unbelievable that a lot of you out there who support Donald Trump are like, yeah, it's okay if my guy does it, but I hate everybody else when they do it, especially if you got ground down in the courts and you got your house stolen from you. I still, to this day, don't understand how people could go through this process, No, everything is corrupt, and then they come out the other side and they go, oh yeah, I'm gonna be down with Trump. I don't get that psychology. I mean, I've learned a lot about psychology because, in our programming, what am I talking about? In our production, I had a chance to interact with Dr. Phil Zimbardo, one of the greatest psychologists in the world. In fact, the CIA studied this guy forever. He created the Stanford prison experiment, and he was the professor emeritus at Stanford, and he's one of the good guys, and he created this program called the Hero Imagination Project that I hope that everybody gets behind eventually. But he taught us what's known as the Lucifer effect. Why people do things that are completely evil. You remember I said a couple of days ago, the only way you can explain the world that we actually live in is that 3/4 of the people who went to the Star Wars back in the day were actually rooting for Darth Vader, that wanted to freaking work for the Empire. Come on, man. Who doesn't want freedom? Who doesn't want stability? Who doesn't want common sense? Who doesn't want the good guys to win? Well, apparently most of you are sitting on your hands looking for answers. So what I'm telling you is, watch the con, study the con, go to the website in my my YouTube page, Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con. Let's build this thing, but what we're building to is just this dynamic, this chorus, this echo chamber. Everybody equipped with the truth, everybody telling their story, everybody coming out of the woodworks like, overcoming the dam or the castle and the moat, and we're coming through the moat, we're coming over the towers, we're coming through the gates in every which way because we know right from wrong. We know corruption when we see it. We don't want to live in a corrupt country where the bad guys get to lie, steal, and deceive us all day long, and they get free freaking money. While the rest of us are pretending like what? We live in a capitalist system that's got supply demand, that's got, a nation of by and for the people where the law has integrity and nobody's about. That's all bullshit. The system owns us. And it's purely American. It's American to say, no way, no more. I'm not standing for it. That's what it means to be an American. That's why we had the revolution against King George III. That's why we had the Civil War against the South. That's why we had the Civil Rights Movement. That's how we stuck it to Hitler when we went down on fascism and freaking crushed them with the help, quite frankly, not help, a huge you can't even understand the sacrifice of what the Russians did against the Nazis, but all of it came together to create this world that flourished for some time where the United States was the good guy, the shining city on the hill, until we got insanely corrupt. So it took me, I don't know how much time, looks like almost 20 minutes, to be able to get to the final point. We got to have a Pecora hearing, a modern-day Pecora hearing, to basically flush out the facts led by real prosecutors that basically puts these, financial con artist on trial. And it has to be in a way that this country has always done it, just like Ferdinand Pecora, the Sicilian immigrant who was literally first generation. Think about the time period he had to come out. He was literally comes off the boat. He's got this big family. He lives in a poor, part of, I think it was Queens. It was adjacent to Manhattan, wherever he was. But the long and the short of it is he's self-made, he gets his own education, he helps his family out, and he becomes this prosecutor. He comes out of Tammany Hall, which was, of course, the government in New York at the time, and he understands corruption. He understands how people, trade. And you want to know how this stuff works? Watch Gangs of New York, Great depiction of the whole thing. And then ultimately, he comes out of the situation after the Great Depression where he had 25% unemployment. Misery was insane, not just in the United States, but around the world. It's what led to World War II. And then what we did, as opposed to go down the road of what Stalin did with communism or what Hitler did with fascism, we reconstituted the law. Ferdinand Pecora laid out the dirty secrets and the games that the CEOs of Wall Street were doing, which incidentally were all WASP at the time. White Anglo-Saxon Protestant, right? So these guys had a firm grip on the financial system, Wall Street. They had a firm grip on the law. They had a firm grip on government. They had complete control. And so here comes this Italian immigrant, and they called him all sorts of nasty names. He didn't have a shot. But this guy had the integrity and the fortitude and the courage to get inside, figure out the facts, give them to the American people because the media was actually paying attention. And lo and behold, we ended up with the Glass-Steagall Act that rectified the problems that created the Great Depression. And then we ended up with the Securities and Exchange Commission, which are the cops on the beat, and the Securities and Exchange Act, which basically lays out that everything in finance, everything in securities has to meet certain conditions of protocol based on reps and warranties, which then holds these companies accountable and all the middlemen that put these deals together if they're selling junk. That's the whole idea. But in the late 90s, we ended up, well, it really starts with Reagan, but it goes all the way through Reagan. This is nonpartisan. Everybody was in on it. The Reagan administration, the Bush administration, the Clinton administration, most particularly. Bush one was just the joker who actually elevated this thing to no end. And of course, Mr. Fix-It was Obama, who was supposedly be change we can believe in, who had his FDR moment, but he played ball. And now he's got $140 million and nobody's the wiser. Meanwhile, him and Oprah Winfrey can sit on top of their freaking golden thrones while people like Addie Polk lost their lives. And it wasn't just Addie Polk, I can assure you. And there's tens of thousands of millions of whatever of people that are homeless right now. Many of whom have been forced into probably addiction and trying to survive. I can't even imagine the hell you would go through. And then you have guys like Tucker Carlson putting the blame on them for, oh yeah, they want to be drug addicts. Look, people get problems usually as a consequence of something that happened before. Like I continue to say, what happened yesterday informs what happens today, which informs tomorrow. I'm trying to create the great resurrection. I've got the facts on a platinum platter. Joe Rogan's not bringing it to you. Russell Brand's not bringing it to you. The mainstream media, particularly the New York Times, sure as shit isn't bringing it to you. They've all hit it or they don't understand it and nobody knows anything. I'm telling you, the whole system is in on it. What I'm talking about is the Federal Reserve, the asset managers, the financial system, which puppeteer and control our government. That's all there is to it. It's a monarchy and or aristocracy. It's King George III. That's why I made my first movie documentary. It was called Forward 13, Waking Up the American Dream. My entire inspiration, my aspiration was, look, the 13 colonies of the original United States, for better or for worse, with all of the problems that they had, they did come together and they did frickin' stick it to the Redcoats and King George III, and they created a government of, by, and for the people based on separation of powers. Now, whether or not they got it perfect in the beginning, they didn't. Of course they didn't, but they put it down on paper, and of course that's the whole notion of in order to form a more perfect union, and Martin Luther King saying, I just want us to live true to what we put down on paper. Don't you get it? It's incumbent upon our generation to rise above this madness, come together with the facts and the truth to save the day for democracy, freedom, and liberty and justice for all. That's what's on the line. And if we don't do it, honestly, they're gonna make it worse. I don't know how close we are to another, huge run in stock markets, which then sees up liquidity in markets, so nobody's got a job and nobody's got cash, and then everybody goes through foreclosures and everybody goes homeless and come on. Come on. How long do you want to stand for this madness? How long do you want to be under the thumb of people that are playing you for the fool you are? You're not a fool if you actually dive in, pay attention to what I'm telling you, open up your mind, and just check out the facts. And then let's get to work, man. That's what we have to do. Literally, for those of us who believe in liberty and justice for all and the sanctity and the dignity of the integrity of this system, that, the sacrifices that came before us are monumentally bigger than any of us could ever conceptualize in our mind. We're going to let that all go to waste? Again, I'm not running for president. I'm a muckraker. I'm a guy just bringing the truth. But I am trying to get us all together to understand the truth so that we can overcome the madness together. I know that there is more good people out there that believe in dignity and honesty, integrity, than the rat bastards that operate with complicity, hypocrisy, and duplicity. I know that. Except here's the difference, right? The ones that are actually the bad guys are so much more ambitious, so much more clever. They think you're an idiot, and they think that you're not going to do anything about it. So far, they've been right. I'm trying to change that because I'm not that kind of person. Onwards and upwards. Let's get this.